So we did have a lot of applicants for the award, and we wanted to give a runners-up prize to Kelly Jones, who is a doctoral candidate in agricultural and resource economics here at Berkeley. She's particularly interested in the HIV/AIDS epidemic in Africa and was a Peace Corps volunteer in Kenya before joining us here in Berkeley, and we're really excited to share with you her proposal as well.
So I'd also like to thank SIGA and the Weiss family for their generosity in supporting this work. As we've seen and presented in a lot of the work today, investing in and empowering girls has potential for both social and economic benefits. And the project that I'd like to share with you for the next few minutes looks at how a U.S. policy has the potential ability to affect girls' and women's ability to invest in themselves in some sense by determining their own fertility outcomes. Because fertility outcomes can also determine educational attainment, ability to participate in the labor market, her own health and well-being, as well as her ability to invest in her own children. So this policy is called the Mexico City Policy because it was first introduced at the UN Population Conference in Mexico City in 1984. And this policy states that the U.S. shuns the use of abortion as a means of family planning, and that henceforth no foreign NGOs that perform or promote abortion are eligible for USAID funding. And because this policy forbid recipient organizations to lobby for or provide education or counseling for abortion, its opponents dubbed it the global gag rule. So as you might imagine, this is a rather partisan issue in U.S. politics. And it's been alternately turned on and off again several times over the past 25 years. And the red bars here show the 8-year periods when the policy was in effect. Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama each made his change of choice on his very first day in office. And in addition, the policy has been the subject of numerous court battles, over 20 congressional votes, and yet there has not been any attempt to look at whether or not this policy is even achieving its stated aims of reducing abortion in other countries, or to look at how it's affecting women's lives. So I'm examining the effects of this policy in Ghana using individual level data on pregnancy histories of women, including the use of induced abortion. And I use a regression discontinuity design to focus on the time window just around on either side of each of these policy changes. And by using a woman fixed effect, I effectively compare, for a given woman, is she more or less likely to abort a pregnancy that occurs just before the policy change rather than just after? And I look at several different demographic subgroups, as you can see here, and for not any of these groups do I find that there was a significant reduction in the use of abortion as a result of this policy. And rather surprisingly, for rural women and these subgroups here, I actually find that there's an increased use of abortion. So what could explain this? Well, advocacy reports have asserted that the NGOs that refused the policy suffered massive budget cuts as a result of the loss of their USAID funding. And as a result, they were forced to cut back service provision that was far outside the scope of abortion, things like contraceptive provision, maternity services, and voluntary counseling and testing for HIV/AIDS. And that in particular, the bulk of the service cutbacks occurred for contraceptive provision in rural outreach. And so unfortunately, I don't have contraceptive use information for each woman through time, but what I can look at is the overall availability of contraceptives in Ghana. And based on 3 different time periods where service provision assessments were taken, it does seem that there's a significant reduction in availability of a number of contraceptive commodities during the time of the policy. But what I can also look at is how the likelihood of pregnancy for a woman was affected by the policy. And in urban areas, it really wasn't. And that's likely because there are many outlets for accessing contraception in urban areas. But for rural women, pregnancy was actually increased by the policy. And if this increase is in fact due to reduced access to contraception, then these are assumedly unintended pregnancies. And this shows pregnancy outcomes for women in rural areas that have any level of basic education. And as you can see, out of every 100 pregnancies, about 9 are aborted. And the blue and gray dots show pregnancies that result in live births, and the gray ones are ones that are reported as either mistimed or unwanted births. And what I find is that for this group of women, the policy resulted in a 12% increase in overall pregnancies. And based on my estimates for the increased use of abortion for this group, it seems that about 1 in 3 of these pregnancies ended in abortion, of these additional pregnancies, which further suggests that the other pregnancies that were carried to term were additional unwanted or mistimed births. So I find that not only does this policy fail to reduce abortion for any subgroup that I can find, but I also find that over the tenure of the policy in rural Ghana alone, it resulted in about somewhere around 100,000 additional abortions and somewhere between 250,000 and 500,000 additional unintended births. These are births that likely pulled girls out of school or pulled women off the labor market or ultimately reduced women's ability to invest in the next generation of girls. And so I hope that these impacts are taken into consideration the next time that this policy is under consideration for reimposition.
So thank you all for staying and for joining us for a really interesting discussion and debate. I want to close by thanking our staff for organizing this event. This couldn't have happened without SIGA's team, which includes Lisa Chen. Are you in the room, Lisa? She might be just outside. Okay, Lauren Falco and Amanda L'Esperance, who are at the back, and Tyler Martz, who may also be in the room. Just a round of applause to thank them all. We learned a lot today about interventions that do or do not improve outcomes for women and girls. We also heard from our panel about some of the barriers and some of the questions that researchers might address in future. So we will put all of the PowerPoints that we can on the website, siga.berkeley.edu. We'll also be posting the papers so that you can all read about these studies in more depth. And we look forward to seeing you next year for our Evidence to Action Summit. Thank you so much.